good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Chamber's Government Affairs Forum featuring United States Congressman Stephen Lynch. I know most people in the room, but I'm Jim Rooney, President and CEO of the Greater Boston Chamber of Commerce, and it's a particular pleasure to be hosting Congressman Lynch today. I'm sure when we get to the part of the program where we chat, we may digress back into Stevie and Jimmy a little bit. We've known each other. You know, a lot of times you say my friend, but Stephen and I have been friends since we were playing wiffle ball down in the Project Court, Ben Court, many, many years ago. And I think, Congressman, the only two people that might have thought would be in this position today is your mother and my mother. I don't think anyone else in the neighborhood would have thought that. Anyway, this Government Affairs Forum connects the business community with leading officials in the state and in our local governments, and in today's case with our federal government. And it's particularly timely. I'm sure all of you recognize that with the recent presidential election still on our minds. You know, it's nice to have Congressman Lynch scheduled as our featured speaker today. I'm sure that he will talk about what that all means, and certainly we'll have that conversation when we sit down. As we close out 2024 and prepare for the new year, it's important for all of us to hear from leaders in our community like Congressman Lynch about the work he's doing and the role he plays on influential committees down in Washington, D.C. on behalf of not only his district, but the entire Commonwealth of Massachusetts. At the Chamber, we continually advocate for policies that sharpen the competitive edge of Massachusetts so that all businesses and all people can thrive, and that's in Congressman Lynch's blood, I know, to compete every day on behalf of Boston and Massachusetts. And we're not slowing down. We'll certainly continue to advocate on behalf of our community moving into 2025. We're almost ready to start the program and welcome the Congressman to the podium, but I do want to pause for just a moment. This is our last Government Affairs Forum of the year. It's been a great year for this series, and I want to begin by thanking our long-standing sponsor of the Government Affairs Forum, Bank of America. Bank of America has been partnering with the Chamber for 20 years now on this important event, but you know, more broadly here in Boston and in Massachusetts, there's so many issues that Bank of America gets behind, whether it's housing issues, job issues, healthcare and food access issues. If you see a nonprofit or an effort going on around town, oftentimes you'll see the Bank of America brand present as a sponsor, and no more is that more present than on the Boston Marathon. So please join me in thanking Bank of America for not only their sponsorship, but the work they're doing in the community. And with that, I'm pleased to turn the podium over to Mihal Chamberlain, President of Bank of America, Chamber Executive Committee member, to introduce our speaker.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being with us on another great day here in Boston. Jim, it's my pleasure on behalf of the Bank of America team that's here with us today to really say thank you, first of all, and the Chamber team for all the gatherings that you put together throughout the year. As you mentioned, it's incredibly important that we do engage with local and federal officials with everything that's going on in our world today to make sure that we all understand the issues, and as private businesses, we can contribute and give back to the community. We're only as strong as our local communities, and having the Congressman here today to talk about some of the key things that are on his mind, not only for our region, but nationally, is really important. That's why we love sponsoring the Government Affairs Forum every year. So we appreciate the opportunity to do it. We know how much work goes into it. So I'd like to just give a hand to the Chamber team today for all their efforts. So with that, we'll move quickly. I'm honored today to be able to introduce today's featured speaker, Congressman Stephen F. Lynch. Before his political career, Congressman Lynch entered the Iron Workers Apprenticeship Program and joined Boston Iron Works Local 7. Then after serving in the Massachusetts House of Representatives, Congressman Lynch was elected to Massachusetts State Senate in a special election, and he's currently representing the 8th Congressional District of Massachusetts, and he's a member of the Financial Service Committee, where he serves on the Subcommittee on Digital Assets, Financial Technology, and Inclusion. And the Congressman is the lead Democrat on the bipartisan working group on artificial intelligence, so I'm sure we'll be talking a bit about that this morning. Congressman Lynch, as Jim said, and his wife continue to live in his lifelong home of South Boston, and we're thrilled to again have him and thank him for agreeing to address us today. So without further ado, Congressman Lynch, please join me at the podium.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Mihal, for that very generous introduction, and thank you, Jim Rooney. In addition to sponsoring this forum, you know, Bank of America is also involved in a number of projects in my district. I've got a big part of the city of Boston, the city of Quincy, the city of Brockton, and about 18 towns that I represent. It's close to 800,000 people, but Bank of America has been kind enough that we have this, Jim will remember this, the Mary Ellen McCormick housing development, which was one of the first public housing developments built in the United States. It's very old, built in the late 30s, early 40s, named after former Speaker of the House, John W. McCormick's mom, Mary Ellen. And so it's in dire need of redoing. So we searched about, and we're working with the mayor's office and the governor's office to rebuild that development, which houses about 1,400 deeply affordable housing units. And the idea is to recreate that, all those units, those 1,400 deeply affordable low-income units, but also add about 600 units of workforce housing, which would allow teachers and construction workers and police officers and firemen to live there as well, with slightly subsidized rents, and then a couple of thousand units of unaffordable housing that pays for the rest. But I'm delighted to say that Bank of America stepped up big time. Thank you, especially with the workforce housing piece, which is the most difficult to fund, oddly enough. There aren't a lot of there's only one federal program called the Choice Neighborhoods Program that allows you to take federal money for that purpose. So just want to say thank you to Bank of America. It's one of those things you do, you know, behind the scenes, but it has a huge impact. So thank you again for the kind introduction. It's wonderful to join you. It's been a while since I spoke to this group, but at the outset, just let me say thank you to all the business entities, all the businesses here who help us on a daily basis to meet the goals of our city's business community to promote continued economic growth and prosperity to this region. For me, it's job creation. Right? It provides opportunity for those who might not otherwise have that opportunity, and also maintains Boston's status as a national leader in the business community. And we could not have a better leadership team than Jim Rooney and his team leading the chamber, so we're extremely thankful. And I'm extremely proud. I think my mother would have expected you to rise to such heights. I don't know if your own mother would, but my mother. I saw your mom the other night. I was at a time for Richie Linehan, one of our retiring court officers, and your mom was there, 91 years old. Yeah, so, and she looks great, sharp as a tack, you know. Asked about all my sisters, and didn't miss a trick. So you come from good stock, and I offer your mother my love. But just under 2 weeks ago, America made a decision of great consequence. While I was obviously disappointed in the results, I spent a couple of weeks down in Scranton, Pennsylvania, trying to help the Harris campaign. But again, while I'm disappointed in the result, I am glad that the integrity of our election was maintained, and that no one was questioning the results. So you got to take the good with the bad, I guess. I especially, I had a chance to deal with, on the Oversight Committee, we deal with the whole electoral process. So I just have great admiration for our poll workers, the election officials across the country who withstood a fair amount of criticism and even threats. And that includes, my thanks include our own Secretary of State, Bill Galvin, for the work that he did in maintaining the integrity of the electoral process here in Massachusetts as well. So everything ran fairly smoothly across the country, and there have been no incidents of creditable criticism. But with the election now over, we in Congress are forced to get back to work on the issues that are facing Americans each and every day. And while there's still a sort of a question mark as to what changes this new administration will bring, we do need to find ways to work together to find bipartisan solutions that will move our country in the right direction whenever that is possible. However, if, as some recent appointments may indicate, there is a retrenchment from the rule of law or a departure or an abandonment of say, peer review and hard science in the area of health care, that would be disastrous for the country, but also extremely harmful to our area, to the area that you represent, the greater Boston area. Ironically, I remember Ted Kennedy's last active session in the Senate. We were able to pass an NIH funding bill for $9 billion. It was the largest funding bill for research at the National Institute of Health in the country's history. And I was on the House side. We did not say, okay, this teaching hospital gets X amount. We didn't do that. We just put the money to NIH and then trusted them to allocate the monies where they would be most impactful. And just because of the location of our teaching hospitals and the location of research centers within this country, the greater Boston area received between 30 and 40% of that $9 billion because of who we have here and the research that we conduct. So the allocation of research dollars at the federal level, now, Department of Defense has about 40% of that, but much of that comes to the Boston area. And then NIH research, because of, as I've mentioned, the wonderful hospitals and teaching hospitals we have here and research institutes here, that is incredibly important to our region. So having Robert Kennedy there gives me great concern. Given his statements and some of his earlier positions. So we have to be protective of that. And of course, if we thought that the appointees of the administration were hostile to the rule of law or to hard science and preserving those institutions, then of course it would require a relentless resistance to that agenda in order to preserve the integrity of those institutions as well as others whenever possible. So we'll have to stay tuned. I'm sure we may have a couple of questions on that issue during the Q&A segment. But bringing our discussion to a more local level, I wanted to talk about this a little bit this morning about the serious concerns I have regarding the readiness of our overall healthcare system and in the aftermath of the collapse and bankruptcy of the Stewart Healthcare network. A situation that I think might have been avoidable but for the perverse incentives in the so-called private equity or hedge fund healthcare model that led to Stewart's leadership to really put personal profits and company profits and that sort of thing over the needs to provide health care to the people. And while I am enormously glad that Governor Healy and Kate Walsh and others were able to cobble together a temporary solution on the fly, and that effort was indeed commendable. And they were able to save, I think, 6 out of the 8 Massachusetts hospitals included within the bankruptcy structure. There's still a lingering and I think latent vulnerability in our healthcare system and acute care hospital network. And I'm just talking about my own experience inside my own congressional district, right? We've lost in the last 10 years Quincy Hospital, New England Sinai Hospital in Stoughton, Kearney Hospital in Dorchester. We've lost Norwood Hospital that served a large number of towns in my district and beyond. We've also had temporary or extended closures at Brockton Hospital and Good Samaritan Hospital in Brockton for significant periods. And while there's been this scramble to arrange sort of these shotgun weddings where a so-called healthy hospital will take over one of these wounded or dysfunctional hospitals, it's too soon to tell whether these shotgun marriages will allow us to maintain a system that reliably and adequately meets the needs of our communities. And one data point, so I'm pretty close with the hospitals in my district and some beyond that, but I've had an opportunity just to sort of kick the tires, right? I spent time at all of our acute care hospitals, Brockton Hospital, Good Sam, South Shore Hospital, Kearney Hospital, obviously. And one data point that I'm alarmed at is the practice of boarding. So boarding, for those who aren't familiar with that term, is an instance where you have a patient who comes to the hospital, usually it's the emergency department, and it needs to be admitted, but there are no beds. There are no beds. So the hospital is forced to resort to what is called boarding. They put that patient on a cot, or in some cases in a wheelchair, and put them in a corridor, usually adjacent to or within the emergency room department. And they wait. They wait for a bed to open up. So that practice, boarding, used to be a violation. Hospitals used to get written up because of, if someone was found to be boarding. Now it is practice. It's hard policy that is engaged in by every single hospital in the state. And so in some cases, I've gone to a hospital and they had 30 emergency room beds and they had 30 people in the corridor waiting, so they had 100% of their capacity in their emergency room waiting in the corridor to be seen. And so obviously I get calls to my office from families. My mom's been 4 hours or 5 hours in the corridor. We're trying to get her a bed. Can you help us out? And that has not always been the case. That's sort of it's been around for a while, but there are more calls and more desperate situations. So I worry about that. And again, it's happening at every single hospital. I've taken time, as I said, to visit the hospitals in my district, all of them that I've mentioned. Also, Mass General, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful hospital, established in its current form in like 1811. So they've been around a while. Recently, they broke their record for boardings. They had more boardings than they've ever had in the history of their country, in their institution since 1811. And so when Mass General is struggling with that, then we've got a problem. Now here's the thing: when we're trying to save Kearney Hospital to keep that open, when we were trying to reactivate Norwood Hospital, which wasn't in the bankruptcy structure, right? Norwood Hospital was under construction. They had a flood there a couple of years ago, and they were in the process of rebuilding, Stewart was, rebuilding Norwood Hospital. It's about 80% complete, but they shut it down because of the bankruptcy and walked away. When we were trying to reactivate that hospital, we got pushback from some quarters that said that, well, we have too many beds in the system. We have too many beds in the system. But when I visited all these hospitals, they all had corridors full of people waiting for admission to the hospital. So I believe there's a blind spot there, and I worry about that deeply. In a way, it may help the hospital operation by having the ability to operate at 110% or 120% of capacity. In other words, you never have an empty bed if you have 30 or 40 patients waiting for admission. So you're always operating at over 100% capacity, and it might reflect a certain amount of efficiency, but it doesn't reflect the disservice and the pain and suffering that's being absorbed by the population. As well, this backing up of the number of people who are seeking admissions to hospitals reverberates. In other words, when Norwood Hospital closes down, the people who live in that cluster of towns, Norwood, Walpole, Dedham, Canton, Westwood, they go to, and the ambulance services in those towns, which have to expand, so they're all looking to add ambulances to their town, first responder system so that they can effectively get people more quickly to those outlying hospitals, whether someone from Norwood is being brought to Boston or being brought to Brockton for care. It's causing a further buildup in those other remaining hospitals. So it's causing a problem. And also it's putting tremendous stress on our first responders and obviously the nursing and hospital staff that has to monitor that activity. And what worries me most deeply is what might happen if we had a severely resistant form of the flu or another form or iteration of a pandemic like COVID, where you have a sudden surge. And normally, if you had a 3 or 5% vacancy rate, you might be able to absorb some of that surge, that is coming at us at our emergency systems. But again, remember, now that surge is surging into a situation where we already have, a 10% oversubscription to the emergency rooms, and there is already a negative availability of beds, right? We've got people waiting when that surge occurs. So while I understand that scramble to sort of reorganize and in some cases consolidate the number of beds in the Commonwealth, I think we really need to revisit that before something happens where we face an active crisis in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We've got a great legacy and history of high-quality health care. We are a national model, but I'm seeing cracks in the system that I hope we can revisit, and I'd really like to see Norwood Hospital reopened, reactivated to absorb some of the overage that's out there in the system. So let me just move on to a more general issue that I think, rather than focusing on healthcare, talks about the general environment here in Massachusetts. We've got some tremendous strengths that we have in our greater Boston area. Our colleges and universities continue to attract and develop the amazing talent that allows a lot of companies in this room to thrive. But that is just one element of a successful formula to be competitive, especially in a slowing economy. I'm an old iron worker, so I have a tendency to try to read the Dodge reports, which projects projects that are forthcoming, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years away. I also sit on a group of elected officials where we generally review projects that are in the conceptual stage, at a very early stage. And for the past dozen or so years, we've been especially busy reviewing project after project that is proposed for our area, especially in the city of Boston. But the pace of those developments has slowed. We don't see a lot of larger projects in the pipeline, and that gives me pause. That gives me great concern. Because of the amount of time it sometimes takes through the environmental process and development process and the community activation process. And I just worry that, especially in a slowing economy, we should be careful. We should be careful to avoid taking our previous success for granted. You know, over the past 20 years, we've actually witnessed a steady march of development projects, both public and private, that have provided enormous benefits in terms of expanding our job base and creating low unemployment and a robust stream of tax revenue that allows local and state governments to provide expanded services. But that did not happen by accident. It was the result of purposeful and strategic thinking that created an environment for large and small businesses to succeed. And as I say, as a structural iron worker who used to make a living building high-rise office towers, many of them in the city of Boston, I tend to take a longer view of the development cycle. I tend to focus on those Article 80 projects, that's a section of the City of Boston zoning code that begins environmental review and impacts of projects on the public realm and ways that project would fit into the overall fabric of the City of Boston and beyond. And I'm concerned right now, I don't see the volume of projects that I've seen in the past, to say again. We see a vacancy rate in Class A office space at, I think, around 25 to 27%. And I have periodic meetings with the Boston Federal Reserve. They're very kind. They're a great source of data. To a granular extent, they can tell me what's going on in my district in terms of number of people who are behind on their mortgage payments, or they can tell me the vacancy rates in office space. And they suggest to me that the vacancy rate in office space here in Greater Boston has not peaked yet. So I worry about that. And also, I know that many of the office tower institutions are seeking abatements, which would prompt a reduction in tax revenues for the city and beyond. So I would just recommend that we be mindful that we are in a competition every single day for businesses to invest and locate here in Greater Boston area, as opposed to the Research Triangle down at Raleigh-Durham or even Austin, Texas. We've found ourselves in a competition with them as well, and it's a much different environment. And there are other options for businesses and companies to locate or expand as opposed to the city of Boston. There are many data points that go into those decisions for other companies. The availability of affordable and reliable power, the availability of financing, of available land costs for both development and for housing for their employees, which is often connected to the efficiency of transportation options. Tax policy is extremely important, and tying all of this together are partners in government whose goal is to help create those jobs and spread that opportunity by providing leadership and predictable and balanced regulatory environment. In closing, we have much that recommends the Greater Boston area. We are a port city that is steeped in history with a rich cultural legacy, and we have tremendous potential for growth if we manage it well. So I welcome your questions. Again, I thank Jim for the courtesy of attending this morning, and happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Congressman. And I'd like to begin kind of where you wrapped up on this whole issue of development, both in the commercial and the housing space. And I know that a mentor to you and me, your predecessor, Congressman Moakley, taught us that, our job every day is to create jobs, that's sort of what we need to do to create an environment in which, people are succeeding both personally and professionally, get the jobs built. You mentioned the slowdown in, really what is groundbreakings, starting the construction project. A lot of good ideas out there. I've offered that those 20, 25 years of booming success in the waterfront and other parts of Boston were a post-artery kind of era thing in which, we unleashed the private sector and growth. And now we're in a post-pandemic era, and, the market's changed. I mean, we're competing with other cities, as you said. Have we adjusted our thinking from the post-artery era in which, government, particularly local governments, were, trying to extract from developers and get people to sort of do things, to a post-pandemic era in which things just aren't penciling out? And, what's it going to take to unleash the development we need, not just in commercial, but in housing? Do we have to reframe our thinking on those issues?
Yeah, great question. I think coming out of the central artery, that was a situation where government and a public development project, I think it was $16 billion or $18 billion at the time, huge amount of money, biggest construction project in the history of the country. That tried to create a platform for private investment that would come in behind it, and also deal with some of the growth restrictions that the old expressway, elevated expressway, lack of a third harbor tunnel created. So we had some constrictions that those projects got rid of. I still think we are at a similar moment right now, where we could repeat the success that we had and the burst of energy that followed that project. So right now we've seen rail activity double basically in the last since we got through the pandemic. I met with Steve Gardner, the regional executive for Amtrak, and the limitation now in Boston is the lack of train platforms to bring trains into the South Station area. So what they do right now, they have 13 rail platforms at South Station, and in order to bring a 14 train in, they need to pull a train out to replace it. So it creates a bottleneck in the city of Boston at South Station. So what we're working with, the reason I met with him is we're working on a project that would potentially allow the state of Massachusetts to take the existing general mail facility post office at South Station, take over that, find a new location for that, and create, and to double, to have 26 rail lines coming into Boston, which would greatly increase the viability of rail transportation within the city of Boston. It would also, I think, activate some of those outlying suburbs to become viable residential communities that would allow people to live in those outskirt communities and come into Boston for work every single day. It works on several different levels. It also expands the availability of housing by including those those communities into that ecosystem. So we're at a similar point right now, and we have to meet the moment. So I'm hoping that, and just as an aside, in taking that parcel from the post office right now, we would reopen Dorchester Avenue to through traffic, which would greatly help the city manage its traffic problems, and provide that parcel is basically pre-zoned to like 45 stories. So it will allow us to put a huge either research or multimodal center in there that would provide the jobs and some of the growth that we're worried about. So yeah, I think there's tremendous opportunity, as I said, if we manage it well. And you know, there are enough obstacles that we have to clear in the nature of large projects like that we really do need government officials to be, you know, in league with great thinkers and enterprises that want to come in and invest in our city. We should be partnering with them and not seeing them as adversarial when they come into the city.
Yeah, Congressman, I think you're exactly right that unleashing or public investment, particularly in transportation, it is leverage to unleash private investment. And we've seen that so many times in our community, whether it's MBTA expansion, the Big Dig, as I said, that truly unleashed that kind of development and creation of jobs that we want. And again, you're exactly right that those transportation investments you're talking about not only serve the mobility issue, but unleash housing, contribute to climate change issues, accessibility issues. I mean, there's so many other public issues or priorities that get solved by a transportation strategy. While you're talking about South Station, would you care to opine on your colleague, Congressman Moulton's thoughts on North-South Rail Link? He's been a big advocate for that project.
Yeah. So the North-South Rail Link, first of all, and I read an article in the paper 2 weeks ago about this, and they sort of miss one important point. So you can already go from North Station to South Station by rail. I know that some of the reporters who were writing on this did not realize that. You can go from North Station to South Station by rail. You can go from South Station to North Station by rail. As someone who ran the T, you know that. You have to change trains. You have to change trains. You got to go to Haymarket. If you're coming out of South Station, you got to go to Haymarket, and then I think it's Government Center, and then you go to North Station. And the other way, I think you go to Government Center, and then you just reverse but you do have to change trains. It's inconvenient. I talked to Amtrak about this, and they are well aware of it, and the MBTA. So what my dear friend, was suggesting is that we build a separate tunnel, a direct tunnel between North Station and South Station, ostensibly so people wouldn't have to change trains. They could go directly from North Station to South Station without changing trains. The cost of this project is about $20 billion. And my thinking is, having sat on the Transportation Committee, being a party to the debate that goes between states that we negotiate with, so, New Jersey has a tunnel they want. Arizona wants to add, 500 miles of highway. There are all these competing, Chicago wants to expand their airport. We're competing for dollars. And so we sit as a committee and we review the impact. So if we put our project forward and say, we want $20 billion for a direct tunnel so people don't have to change trains, we lose. Also, think about the the allocation of transportation money within our state. We have spent tremendous amounts of money at the easterns, I'm speaking to the choir, I guess, in the greater Boston area, with the Big Dig, with, all the money that we spent, the $18 billion there, it's all in that area. We have spent nothing on the rest of the state. And so I think a better project to support would be West-East Rail, so-called. We used to call it East-West Rail. Now I guess we're calling it West-East Rail.
I do the same, yeah.
Yeah.
They like when we do that.
And that would be look, when you think about the MBTA, all those communities are paying in, and they're probably not benefiting much from that, right? So here's a chance, and call it just basic fairness. Let's try to push a project that might help the rest of the state as well, that might help Springfield and Worcester and Pittsfield. And I probably shouldn't be saying this as a member of the delegation from Boston, but let's be fair and let's try to get the most impact. That argument would be valid in Congress, and I think would be a winning suggestion, especially with Congressman Neal, if he becomes chair of Ways and Means. That's something that is near and dear to his heart. He would like to see the infrastructure and the rail capacity increased. All of that would again endpoint at South Station. So the project I talked about earlier would be helped enormously by that idea as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm someone that has never met a transportation project I didn't like.
True.
But I do agree that prioritization is a key. And we've also, I represent the Greater Boston Chamber, but I firmly believe that the continued economic growth and success of Boston depends on the growth and economic success of the rest of the state. We need them to succeed. Well, I want to shift to the federal issues and get a little more of your reaction to the recent election. There's a lot of analysis going on now of sort of what happened and what are the big takeaways. What are your takeaways from what happened last week?
Well, this is just my opinion. Sometimes the American people, let me just start out by this. I used to have an abiding faith in the judgment of the American people. I have to say that faith has been shaken. That faith was shaken in 2016, and 2020 when Donald Trump got 77 million votes. I've worked around the country, so I sort of have and I've lived for a while in the South and down in New Orleans and out west. And I understand, like in the Midwest, a lot of people feel like they've been forgotten. I get that, and they're right. But it just blows my mind that Trump won handily, overwhelming support for him. It troubles me that I've also felt that sometimes the American people vote for the party that they fear the least. They vote for the party that they fear the least. And that worries me. As a Democrat, it causes some introspection. Like, where are we if they choose Donald Trump with all his faults over the Democratic Party? We have work to do. I think we have caused, our policy at the border has caused people to be afraid. And it's not just, and I've gone to the border multiple times. I've gone down to El Salvador and Honduras and Guatemala and try to figure out the push factors, meeting with the leaders down there, trying to lean into this, in a way, that we need immigration. We need immigration in this country. It's it's the fabric of who we are. You know, one of my last trips to Afghanistan, I was asked to officiate a citizenship ceremony at Camp Leatherneck, which is in Kandahar province. No, it might be Helmand province. But anyway, they bring all these soldiers and Marines out. There's about 120 of them. And they're from like 90 different countries. None of them a U.S. citizen. Every single one of them, you know, in uniform, you know, the stars and stripes on their shoulder. They had been chasing the Taliban up and down the province. You know, these are people who, when you think about Kennedy's quote, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. These kids were coming to America and wanted to be citizens for all the right reasons, you know. There are those people out there who want to be American citizens. Our task, though, is to know who's coming into this country, to have an orderly process that does not scare the bejesus out of the people of Arizona and New Mexico and California. We've got to know who's coming into our country, number one. Number two, what worries me is, do the people who come into this country, if we're going to take people in, do they understand what we expect of them? Do they understand the social contract of what makes us all Americans? Do they understand what is asked of them? And are we teaching them that? Are we teaching them what it means to be an American? Because right now, God bless them, but there are some of our groups who, from the deepest and best part of their hearts, are trying to assist people to come into the United States. But the first thing they're teaching them is how to get benefits that they may not legally be entitled to, or how to avoid the law, the rule of law. Many of these people are coming from tough situations where the rule of law is not robust, to say the least. And they're coming into a new environment where we are wedded to the rule of law, right? So are we teaching them the wrong things in teaching them how to circumvent the law or receive benefits that they may not be legally entitled to? Is that the right thing to be teaching people? So for those reasons, look, we need immigration. That's going to be our success, but we need to do it the right way. And I think we could turn the hearts of many of the people who now are fearful of immigration and see it as a threat. We could turn that around and demonstrate that there's a huge upside to immigration if we create that process that is trustworthy, that we know who's coming in, and we have a mutual understanding of what is expected of those individuals coming into our country. Yeah.
Congressman, I want to talk about the challenge of working in the minority. You have had the misfortune, I guess, during your tenure, if I'm right.
Most of it, yeah.
Yeah, most of it. I think you had 2 4-year stints that were broken.
I forget.
Yeah, and your predecessor, Joe Moakley, had a good run.
Oh.
in the majority. You know, growing up where you did, and I observed it, and the work you did before you got to Congress, you've always demonstrated the ability to work with people of different opinions and find common ground. And but talk to me about that. Talk to me about, you know, being you know, in the minority, particularly in the environment that we're in.
Yeah. Well, first of all, being the United States Congressman from the 8th Congressional District is the greatest honor of my life. It's the best job. It is the best job. Congress can be like a conveyor belt of problems, right? It's every 7 seconds there's a new problem coming along. And so as a member of Congress, You have to decide. You can't be the champion of every cause, right? You cannot every 7 seconds leap onto another issue. So you have to sort of be selective about, okay, where do my talents lie, and how might I apply them to that particular problem? So you have to decide which problems you're going to glom onto and which you're going to pour yourself into. That's a really exciting process when your constituents and the direction of the country relies upon people making those decisions. So it's the greatest honor of my life, and I love my job. And it never gets boring, never ever gets boring. It's exciting, and it's exceedingly relevant. So from that standpoint, it's not necessarily material or necessary that I be in the majority to work on those issues. It is important that I have partners. You got to get to 218, right? There's 435 members. You need 218 votes if you're going to get something done. So that I'm always on the lookout trying to build relationships with Republicans on the other side, because I know I got my folks, but I'm going to have to pick off in the minority, I got to pick off 20, 25 Republicans, to not only to sell my stuff on the other side, but also when the vote comes up on the floor, I'm going to need their votes. So, sometimes I do horse trading. I don't have a big stake in the farm bill. I got a couple of cranberry bogs like West Bridgewater and some of my towns down by the Cape. So sometimes I trade my vote on that. I'll give them a vote on the farm bill, but I need a vote on the transportation bill. So you got to, because we rely so much on rail, and our infrastructure is the oldest in the country. It is. I had an argument with a guy from Arizona, a member from Arizona. I had to explain to them that the MBTA is older than Arizona, We started the MBTA when Arizona was a territory. You weren't even a state. So they don't get that. They don't get that. So you have these conversations. It's surprising. But in any event, so when I first got to Congress, there was probably, I'd say 65 or 70 Republicans I could work with, Every single trip I go on, I take Republicans with me. I've been to Iraq 20-something times. I've been to Afghanistan 20-something times, Somalia, Ukraine. I just took 5 Republicans to Ukraine. We went over there. Every time I take Republicans on a trip with me, we end up as friends. I find out about their families, their districts, who they are, what they care about. We become friends. So that number has dwindled, though, as Republicans have left, because they're, for various reasons. Some of them just don't want to serve. They didn't want to serve during the Trump administration. They didn't want to go that direction, so they quit. Some of them are getting tremendous heat to move in a different direction, and they don't want that. Some of them just flat out lost to more extreme candidates. So now the number is probably dwindled to like 25 or 30 Republicans in the minority that I can really work with, which is okay. It's not as good as it used to be, but many of those members are in hiding. They're afraid to come out and co-sponsor bills with me because they're afraid they're going to be criticized by their party. And in an institution that relies on compromise and cooperation to get things done, that's not helpful. That's not helpful. So I'm hoping that, and this will bear directly on whether, Donald Trump is able to make recess appointments in the Senate, whether members feel a greater obligation to the people in their districts as opposed to a responsibility to follow the edicts of the president. So they're going to be faced with that, and I'm not sure how that's going to shake out.
Congressman, you have a very important role right now as the leading Democrat on the Financial Services Committee's bipartisan working group on artificial intelligence. There isn't a business that I talk to that isn't wrestling with applications of artificial intelligence and how it is implemented within their companies, but also with their customers and so forth. Talk about the work that that committee's focused on and maybe the opportunities and challenges, particularly for a state like Massachusetts.
Yeah, well, I don't want to get too much into the weeds. Try to keep it at a general level and a practical one. One of the problems we have with AI is that, I'll give you an example. If someone applies, to Bank of America or any of the other banks, Citizens, I know Citizens is here as well. Anybody applies for a loan, the old way was they would, you'd sit with the loan officer and submit all the responses, the applications, and you'd have to, disclose all of your, open the kimono, as they say, expose all of your obligations, things like that. And then the person or a couple of people would make a decision on whether or not you get the loan or not. With AI, you submit your stuff in there, and then this algorithm decides whether you get the loan or not. The problem with AI is that it is so complicated that we cannot explain, after we use the algorithm, we cannot not explain to that person if they get denied. We cannot explain why they got denied. So there's no explainability for many forms of AI. And so we have to figure out how to make, and they may have been wrongly, right? So some of the AI was adversely assessing the applications of minority applicants. We found that out. Maxine Waters, my dear friend, went ballistic, and I don't blame her. A lot of us did. But knowing that, and the reason for that is that the data that informs the algorithm, that informs AI, is taken from us. And we harbor biases and concepts that are discriminatory. They may be hidden, they may be, obtuse, but they're there. So the AI that we create from all our input is biased in many cases. And we have to figure out some way to make sure we monitor these AI algorithms to make sure that they're not improperly denying people loans. So that's one of the challenges that we have. Look, AI is here and it's coming. Some of the back office uses of it is marvelous. It's saving people from doing these, drudgery jobs that are more effectively and fairly conducted by artificial intelligence. But we've got some real challenges in terms of perfecting AI and this whole monitoring concept of AI, continually monitoring out, because it's a learning entity. It's the AI you use today is going to collect a lot of data, and next week it'll be a different AI. It's actually going to take all that extra data and inform itself. It's a learning and ever-changing concept. So we've got to figure out how to monitor that in a continuous basis. And I think there are whole industries that are going to be created to monitor AI in a way that protects the consumer. So, but we are in a great spot in terms of the greater Boston area because of the talent that we have, because of the institutions we have. We just did I hosted well, MIT hosted it, but they allowed me to bring members of Congress, Republicans and Democrats, over to MIT, and we had a whole boot camp on AI, which was really cool. And so we are sort of at a ground zero for AI, and it's because of the university systems and the research systems and the great talent that we have here. So it's going to provide enormous benefits to this region, just thinking parochially, but also it'll be life-changing, and we just have to make sure that it is developed in a way that is not inimical to the basic rights and the ideals that we hold as Americans. Because the Chinese are doing something completely different, right? The Chinese are doing full spectrum surveillance of their entire population, you know? And so that's unfortunately, that's the dark side of AI, that Russia and China can have full spectrum surveillance of every citizen in their country. Something that Stalin never had, something that Hitler never had, and gives tremendous, tremendous power to those institutions. So we have to worry about that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of opportunity, a lot of fears, a lot of challenges, I agree. Congressman, you mentioned in your remarks hoping that your colleagues will act in the best interest of the people in their districts, and I think in your comments today and in the way that you've fulfilled your obligations as a congressman and demonstrated today by how tuned in you are to what's going on in your district. You've certainly done that, and we're grateful for that. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your leadership on behalf of the greater Boston community.
Thank you, Jim.
Please join me in thanking Congressman.